start again.
Okay. So these are some of the sources we use for it. Yeah, it's just jumping along here a little bit. It'll catch up with us. Mountain Canyon Backcountry Flying by Amy Hoomer and Dick Williams. We're going to talk about that. Just some references to that. Survival Vest Philosophy by Backcountry Pilot. Survival Hacks, Alaskan Canadian Regs, and input from some of the members and some real accidents. Personal crash experiences. Rescues from the job. My job as Alaska Wildlife Trooper and CAP Rescue Pilot. Wisdom from Alaskan bush pilots and guidance from Dr. Chet and flight nurse Gretchen, who's not here tonight, but she's going to be with Chet putting on the first aid course for you guys. And of course, from YouTube. So there was an accident yesterday or Friday. I don't know if everybody saw this or not. This was in Tucson, and this guy did the most amazing job. Somehow, he apparently missed that big old pole with his prop. His prop's a little bit scuffed, but it's not bent. Composite would have broken it. It hit it. This guy did an excellent landing. Engine failure, landed on a busy highway, got around power lines and light poles and traffic and made this amazing landing. Nobody got hurt. Conversely, the day before, this was in Akron, Ohio. This guy was trying to get back to the runway rather than just land like the Bywing did on a street. He chose to try to get back to the airport, apparently. Very gusty winds, and unfortunately, he stalled and spun right into a house. He didn't make it. So I don't know how many of you have been to Johnson Creek, but this not only shows the approaches to Johnson Creek and departures from Johnson Creek, but it shows the kind of terrain you'll be flying in Idaho. Everybody hear the volume okay?
Yes.
The Idaho Transportation Department's Division of Aeronautics manages more than 30 of Idaho's most beautiful backcountry airstrips. Many of these destinations are located in remote backcountry locations, making them difficult to access. Pilots planning on flying to these locations should plan ahead and have experience in mountain flying. We recommend that you take your first trip with an experienced pilot or instructor. One of our more popular destinations is the pristine Johnson Creek, located east of McCall, Idaho, near Yellow Pine. The big wide airfield and excellent facilities make it a great backcountry destination. The airfield, however, is in a steep mountain valley. The Division of Aeronautics wants to ensure that everyone has a safe and fun trip. Johnson Creek gets very busy several times each year. It has at times the highest concentration of aircraft among the vast network of Idaho backcountry airstrips. These procedures are designed to expedite the flow of traffic and safely get you in and out of Johnson Creek. There are approaches in from the north and the south, but the ridges among the east and the west prevent pilots from flying a regular traffic pattern. Aircraft arriving at Johnson Creek from the south will check in through the arrival point of Wapiti Meadows, which is about 3.5 miles south of Johnson Creek. For normal canyon rules, you'll offset to the right and fly up to the right side of the canyon. That will take you all the way into downwind for landing at Johnson Creek. Approaching Johnson Creek, pilots will see that the traffic pattern altitude is well below the ridge lines to either side of the runway. This will force you into flying a closer than normal upwind or downwind position around the airport. Flying abeam the airport, you will see the Bryant House. This is a noise-sensitive area. You'll use this portion of the traffic pattern for what we call shopping the airfield. You'll also run your checklist and make sure you know what's moving on the ground. Arrivals from the north will be approaching Yellow Pine, typically flying up that fork of the Salmon River from the west or from the east in the valley around Yellow Pine. Turning to the south, the visual checkpoint is Gap, which is a space in the hills just to the southwest of Yellow Pine. Proceed down the valley, again hugging the right side. This will put you close to the mountains and the trees while flying to upwind. Upwind at Johnson Creek will give you a view of the airport. It's a good time to assess the winds and run through your checklist. Remember, the Bryant House is a noise-sensitive area. Always fly around the Bryant House and never directly over it. Continue flying upwind until you're past the Bryant House and then turn crosswind. Typically, landings are to the south, and so an arrival from the south will go directly to downwind for the landing. Look for the sprinklers and cones and other obstacles that may be on the airfield. Watch for animals that are frequently out in that area. The base leg at Johnson Creek follows the contours of the terrain and extends around in the bowl to the north of Johnson Creek. For most aircraft, this pattern will line you up on a dog leg to final. Energy management is crucial, and if you arrive at half-mile final and you're too fast or too high, it's time to make an early decision for go-around. When executing the go-around, climb down the runway until high enough to offset to the right. If the go-around is started early, there is plenty of room around the trees to the right of the Bryant House. A late decision to go around may leave you unable to outclimb the trees and terrain. In this case, your best chance is toward the lower trees to the left of the Bryant House. That is also the recommended path for aircraft taking off on runway 17 to the south. Primary departure from Johnson Creek is to the north. You'll climb out up the valley toward Yellow Pine.
It seems like once you get down to a certain...
Report passing Yellow Pine with direction of flight and altitude. If you are headed south, follow the same path toward Yellow Pine. Once you've achieved sufficient altitude near Yellow Pine, turn onto the upwind leg down the west side of the airport and continue south through Wapiti Meadows. Flying in the mountains of Idaho is a serious, challenging endeavor, and a number of recent accidents attest to that fact. Safe backcountry flying requires rock-solid skills in slow flight, airspeed control, intimate knowledge of your aircraft performance, and well-prescribed personal limitations. Most of all, safe backcountry flying requires the proper attitude, one that is safe, conservative, and professional. A safe flight is a stress-free and enjoyable flight.
Okay, that's a long video of this presentation. Everything else will go along a little bit quicker, but I think it was pretty worthy of anybody who's going into Johnson Creek, and hopefully you'll get the training and be prepared for that. Ike Huber says, what is what I'm about to do dumb, dangerous, or different? If so, you might want to think about it a little bit more. This gal last week posted this. She has hit all 42 registered backcountry trips in Idaho in this Cub. And this Yahoo learned to fly in this 180 on the beaches of Idaho, but this kind of represents that if you do go down, you want to expect the best, but prepare for the worst, because if you're stuck out there, you want to have something to survive. But this is just where I did my touch and goes for my private pilot in this airplane. This is a 257 horsepower 180, 1955 super lightweight with a massive stall. So could do everything I could in the Cub with this thing except land on really rough strips. And I've had my own experiences, and this probably, you guys may not do this, hopefully, but I landed on Mount Wrangell, on the base of Mount Wrangell. And the snow turned out to be like sugar, didn't set up. And I had landed in some other ski tracks, but they were apparently a very wide tracked Super Cub. On straight skis, I was on wheel skis and loaded like a Trooper Cub is with all kinds of radios and junk. Two big guys, and we sank to the wings, all the way to the wings. Dug for 7 hours and couldn't get out of there. So we spent the night there, got into the survival kit, which was tucked under the back seat, riveted to the floor, and then riveted together in a fiberglass case. So we had to rip it apart with our knives, finally got it apart. And by that time we were starving after digging all day. And there was, hello, there we go. Somebody was muted, not muted. So anyway, we got into, finally got the case ripped open. and all the food had been contaminated by DEET. That was pretty awful. So we didn't have anything to eat and didn't have water. Really stupid, unprepared, and that's what made me decide I needed a survival vest. So there are about 1,200 aviation accidents a year, says NTSB, but quite a few of them are survival as long as we control the airplane right to the crash scene. Here's a case that happened in Idaho.
Miracle in the mountain, the family that crashed into an Idaho mountain, and then that brave call for help. Here's Cecilia Vega.
Mike, send me 911. What is your emergency? Hi, I'm in an airplane and I crashed.
They were trapped, a father, mother, and daughter, inside their mangled Cessna on a remote, snowy Idaho mountain. It was 9 p.m. on Saturday when the Browns went down. Father Brian in the cockpit telling his wife and daughter, "I don't think we're going to make it." Somehow they did, spending the entire night, 15 hours, in below freezing whiteout conditions. The windshield smashed their own blood on the door.
Get up and walk around. Well, my head is split open pretty good.
A fire captain from Northern California, usually it's Brian doing the rescuing. This time, his family needed help. Daughter Heather had pelvic injuries. Mother Jayanne injured her head and back.
How is the weather where you're at?
Still, they stayed calm, starting a fire with the plane's fuel sealing off the cabin to keep warm. A medical helicopter spotted the wreckage, but to get to the family, ground crews had to trek through 6-foot snow drifts down 60-degree mountain slopes.
It was slick, wet, icy, and everything you don't want to have, we had.
Finally, the family hoisted one by one to safety above.
They were very lucky.
Lucky, and tonight, thankful to be in a hospital recuperating together. Cecilia Vega, ABC News.
Okay, so this is a family, Brian Brown, wife and daughter, in Idaho backcountry in the winter. They were flying from California to Idaho. The cons is a pilot was fairly low time, little cross country experience, non-instrument rated private pilot. Airplane was a 172 and it only had lap belts, no harness belts. Dressed in shorts and sandals, the women were, I mean, not dressed for this trip at all. Survival gear, they had nothing on their persons, no survival vest, and they had a small pack on the back, which they couldn't get to easily. They had no flight plan. They relied on their cell phone calls to relatives. Well, what that did was wear down the batteries in the cell phone. They pushed the weather, crashed in the trees in the mountains, and the plane was totaled. And Chet, you want to talk about those injuries?
Let's see what we've got here. So, the head laceration is a very serious injury. And the issue is that the head is so well vascularized that there's just a tremendous amount of blood that can come from a forehead and an injury. The other issue, of course, is you never really know where the mental status is and whether a person's able to make good decisions. I mean, those are some pretty significant things. And let's see, what were the other injuries that we were looking at?
The daughter had the pelvic.
Okay. No. Yeah, so looks like a blunt trauma to the pelvis. That's pretty serious. And the reason is because there are a couple of different major blood vessels in that area. There are three, actually. Aorta goes into the pelvis and then comes out with femoral arteries. It's a very, very well vascularized area also. It's very possible to have large hematomas that can come into the area and wind up obstructing blood flow to other areas. And of course, you can also lose a pretty significant amount of blood in that area as well. And then there's an unconsciousness, which is always concerning. It's always difficult to be able to assess and figure out exactly what's going on with that person. And especially in a very austere environment like this, time is really critical. Some pretty devastating injuries.
Oh, they were very lucky. They got help in a hurry. 50 people actually came out and rescued them, and they got lifted out in a helicopter. They were so lucky they had a portable airband radio, so they could make sure the EOT was broadcasting and they could communicate with the rescuers. So they were very lucky. What they wish they'd done is follow a flight plan. They had flight falling, had an out in the weather, charge their cell phone batteries, and like Chet said, carry a backup battery and cables, worn a survival vest, carried a survival kit with emergency medical supplies, had harness belts, and dressed for the occasion. Any discussion on it? Anybody have anything else they should have done differently? And don't say stayed in California. Okay. So for our flight, we're going to assume that you guys are prepared for this, but AOPA suggests choose a route, minimize travel over remote areas. So that's great, but that's really tough in the backcountry. Sometimes you got to go right over the toughest terrain. Follow flight, use flight following, and check in with Flight Watch. That's so great because they're listening to you and they're looking for you. If you go down, they're going to notice you're missing off the screen. Spend more time looking at the cockpit than looking at the gadget inside. That's something that kind of drives me crazy when I fly with somebody, especially younger people. They want to look at all their whiz bang stuff on the panel. Don't look at the beautiful scenery. And so they're not prepared if something happens. You should always have an emergency landing area in sight. So be looking outside. Frequencies, probably 122.9, you're going to be using most of the time here, unless there's an airport listed that's near you or others you might be using. You might monitor 121.5, but the basics one we're using in the backcountry of 121.9. Know the emergency procedures for your plane. Review those before you leave. Have your checklist handy and refresh your memory items. Where's your fire extinguisher? Where's your ELT remote switch? I had to remind myself for mine is in the Cub the other day. Where's your seatbelt cutter and your survival gear? Dress appropriately. We're going to be seeing some examples of that here in a little bit, but survival vest, have a cell phone that's charged and extra batteries, your PLB, that's your personal locator beacon, and dress appropriately, not shorts, no shoes. And charts, even though you may have all the whiz-bang stuff on your panel, take charts for backup. And, worst case scenario, they make good fire starter too. But you're also going to determine an IFR route frequencies for emergency communication. And we'll be talking about that in a second. Here is the luckiest Mooney crash victim I've ever heard of. Now, Chet, you could talk about the symptoms he had here.
Oh, let's see. So injuries, broken jaw, lacerations, and frostbite. This is essentially really two accidents in one, because the first is the deceleration trauma, and then the second is lack of preparation and having a really difficult time surviving after an injury that would have been survivable, and in this case was. But the issue is that it's really tough when you're not able to survive the elements after having survived an aircraft crash. So in this case, yeah, some pretty significant injuries. Looks like a jaw fracture, which also is very serious. The reason is because the face also very well vascularized, some pretty high pressure arteries there in the face, and can cause some very significant injuries, especially because there really is bleeding that occurs first, and then the second issue is it can potentially obstruct an airway with a jaw fracture. So it's pretty significant stuff. And I also have got some other stuff too. So.
He had symptoms that morning, had a headache, and he was anxious, which he's usually not as a pilot. And he wrote the headache off to not having his coffee that morning because he left early. So he had that continually, went to his destination, was going to return home, still had the headache, and still was kind of feeling a little weird about the flight. Is that a pretty good symptom of carbon monoxide?
It really is. I think the one thing that's probably more reliable than anything else with carbon monoxide is a headache. And the tough part is, I mean, Mike, as you're saying, is that you don't really necessarily know why you're having a headache in certain cases. And in a lot of cases, a person may have a pretty benign reason to have a headache or think that they know why the headache is going on, and they don't really understand. In this case, the headache likely was the result of the carbon monoxide concentration that was increasing. And the other symptoms you see, of course, would be kind of flu-type symptoms without fevers is common also, muscle achiness, and just not generally feeling well. And of course, by the time confusion sets in, it's late enough in the process that you may not be able to rescue yourself.
Mm-hmm. Well, this guy just totally fell asleep. He took a nap.
Without any inputs from the pilot, the aircraft miraculously crashed into a field in such a way that it was survivable. It isn't often we get to hear from a pilot who has experienced carbon monoxide poisoning in flight. This is partly due to the low number of occurrences in general aviation, and this is partly due to the fatal nature of CO-related accidents. According to the NTSB, 77% of aviation accidents involving carbon monoxide poisoning are fatal. But these accidents are worth looking at because they are so preventable. Carbon monoxide is a colorless, odorless gas, and due to the cognitive effects CO has on the brain, without a detector in the cockpit, A pilot and their passengers have little chance of becoming aware of a leak. A functioning carbon monoxide detector in the cockpit is the only way to know if CO is present.
So this just happened last week. Up a goofy kids.
Mike,
Yes.
we did have a question about flight plans in the backcountry.
Yes. Go ahead, please.
Any suggestions on how to close them if you're flying to a remote strip with no phone or internet?
Yeah, we're going to stand by in a minute. I'm going to show you a trick that I learned for that in a pinch, how you can close your flight plan. Because if you're going to be landing, say, at Johnson Creek, and you feel comfortable, your landing is secured, you're set up for landing, established, you can close it, of course, in the air. But let's say you have an emergency and you have to land and you want to close your flight plan. It's really not an emergency, you just landed because of weather. I'll show you how you can do that in a minute. That's a great question. Here's a couple of goofy kids flying the aircraft, sitting over here in my hangar.
You're just going off. Auto traffic, keep window to the others clear. What the heck? Huh. If you saw me, I know I could probably check my ears, but I thought, oh, I did hear Bill fine. Yeah, I mean, me too. Not like I'm getting poisoned, but I don't know.
So is goofiness part of being carbon dioxide poison too? Or they're just kids? Here are some detectors that really great. And that's what the kids were using the Centuries, which is really great, but they had it in the back of the plane and their luggage didn't do them much good. They didn't hear it until they were landing. So what good is that going to do? Like Chet says, it's great if you have your detector close to where you're breathing. So this is a panel one, not that great. This one, if you put it up by your face, that's really good. Lightspeed one is my favorite, and that's what you have one too, don't you, Shep? We both have these, and this has a carbon monoxide detector built right into the headset. So that's the ultimate to me. This one just came out. I don't know if you can see it on the screen. Are we covered on the screen, or can people see that one? Let me see if I can minimize this. Yeah. So this one on the bottom right just came out recently. It's only $26.95. So it's a bargain. You can clip that right on your survival vest. The name of the company, I can show that if anybody's interested, I can send you the link to them. Here's a video of an actual emergency landing.
Mayday, mayday, mayday.
A little bit faster, so I didn't think anything of it. And as I continued down the canyon, I was about 4,000 feet. The base of the canyon's at about roughly the river's at about 1,500 feet. So I had a decent amount of elevation. And about, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 minutes later, I looked at my fuel tank again, and I couldn't see a line. Now there was a little bit of a glare of the sun shining through the roof, and I couldn't see a line on the right-hand side, and I couldn't see a line on the left-hand side. And that scared me a little bit. So I rocked the wings and, finally realized that there was only a little bit of fuel left in my right tank, and my left tank was completely full. So that's definitely not normal. So I started to climb. I climbed from about 4,000 feet up to 6,000 feet. And I was at about 6,000 feet for just a couple minutes. And all of a sudden my engine started to sputter. So at that moment, a lot of things went through my head. It's, they talk about when you're in a traumatic experience, everything sort of flashes before your eyes. And that definitely was true in that moment. The propeller is still windmilling, but it's not producing any power. I tried to work the throttle. I tried to work the fuel pumps, see if anything would get that engine to fire back up again. And nothing was working. The tops of the canyon are at like 6,500 feet. So there's no way I'm making it out of the canyon. So I started descending. I am on my way down, and I didn't see any place that I was going to land and survive. It's hard to relive it, actually. My immediate thought was, can I get can I do something to get it to fire again? You know, I knew that I had an entire tank full of gas. What I couldn't figure out is why it wasn't making it to the engine. And at that point, even if I could figure something out, I didn't know how much time I had. So I turned on my cockpit camera, basically to be my black box, so that someone knew what happened. Oh, man, I lost fuel pressure. I saw this side draining and this side wasn't. Oh, oh God. Oh. It was time to push that SOS button. Let somebody know that I am on my way down. On both sides of me are just these sheer cliffs down into the river. And I'm just scanning everywhere I can think of. I'm looking, you know, over some smaller ridges. Is there anything in this other little valley? Is there anything up this valley? And I see nothing. And I'm just going through all the different scenarios of like, okay, if I land up a hill, the plane's going to roll backwards. Can I jump out fast enough? You know, if I dump in the river, you know, make sure I open the doors so I can get out, so I don't go down with the plane. So at that point, it's let's find anything possible where I can try to land, anything remotely flat. Up ahead of me, I see one little bench, one little flat spot. I don't know, 300 feet. And so I commit. I decide that this is where I'm gonna have to try to put this thing down. The problem is there's a huge oak tree and a gigantic boulder right next to the oak tree. So it breaks up this pretty decent section. I realize I don't see anything in front of me. I think this is gonna be my best shot. The engine at this point is not producing any power. So, you know, I'm gonna make sure that I make it to that spot. And as I make the turn, you know, I'm a little bit high, but I also, again, wanted to make it beyond this tree and this boulder. And so I had to kind of avoid those and. Oh, three. Danielle, you're at the grocery store.
So he's gonna be, so he says the right say, y'all, Christmas,
Holy.
Don't be a little lost, guy. I'm just.
I get that emotional. So I floated a little farther than I was hoping to and dumped those flaps and got it on the ground. And then it was just hammer those brakes and end up on a hill, crash through some small trees. But holy shit, I was alive. Couldn't believe I was on the ground. Couldn't believe that I wasn't somehow trapped in the plane. I didn't crash into something and the engine, you know, blow back against me and you know, trap my legs or something like that. The plane was, for all intents and purposes, you know, still whole. And then I looked over my left shoulder and the one thing I needed to keep me flying was actually pouring out of my wing. there was fuel coming out of the wing. I thought maybe I had punctured the fuel tank or something, and that scared me because I didn't know if that would ignite. So pretty quickly, I tried to get out of my seatbelt, and then it stopped flowing. And I assessed that the danger probably wasn't that bad. I mean, I certainly think about if I didn't make it, what was I leaving behind? My wife and my two girls.
Okay. I think most would agree Dave did an amazing job on selecting the most suitable landing area, sticking with his decision, activating his Garmin device, and making an excellent landing. What might have been a little bit better with the pilot's clothing choice?
I think shorts are great for summer on the beach, but this is not a great selection here for a couple of different reasons. The first is that clothing provides a certain degree of protection against minor abrasions, scratches, things of that sort. And then the other issue is that it's very likely at least somewhat chilly with wind, I would guess, going through. It's pretty cold in the area. So.
And it was going over some pretty tough terrain. He was going from southern Idaho to Kavanaugh Bay, where the fly-in, I believe, is one of the flyouts is going to be for the club. Going over very mountainous terrain, obviously. So wearing no shoes at all and shorts and t-shirt, probably not the best choice. Survival gear, he wasn't wearing a vest. It looks like he had plenty of gear in the back, but could he have got to that in a hurry? And fire extinguisher, I didn't see a fire extinguisher. I'm sure he must have one somewhere in the plane, but I didn't see one where he could grab in a hurry. Door opening. One thing we'll really hit on here in a little bit is if you're going to crash land, open your door before you touch down. I've seen too many crashes where people burned alive because their doors jammed on landing. So get those doors open and exiting. Get the heck out of there. He knew that he had a fuel problem, and he sat in the plane realizing fuel's leaking out of one of the wings, and he sat in the plane way too long. And anything else anybody noticed maybe could have done differently? Okay, we'll move on then if I don't hear anything. So what did these crashes have in common? Well, so far, all of them involved rescues that came very quickly because they were close to help and had communication. This is Kavanaugh Bay, where we've had 2 accidents in the last few years where they've run out of runway, and they weren't 180s or 185s. They were in low wings, and I think the temperature was in the 90s, so the density altitude was way up there, and they just ran out of room and yanked it off the strip and stalled and hit a tree and a cabin and ended up in the lake. Both of them did 2 years apart. Fortunately, there's a doctor who lives across the bay, and there was another doctor there and a paramedic, and they all rescued these people and got them out of the cockpits and got them to help, and nobody died. But both of them were pretty tragic crashes. Didn't need to happen. But the thing about it is again, help was very close. Here's a case that I worked in Alaska. And so let's say if it happens like this, that you're low on terrain, so your ADS-B out is not translating like it should be. The plane is totally destroyed. You have no communications. You get out with what you're wearing and what you can grab. The FAA says the usual recovery time of a downed pilot is just over 40 hours, but it can be a lot longer. And 40 hours can be critical sometimes with injuries, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. All of the really
The FAA says it takes about 40 hours.
Go ahead. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. So if you've got an internal injury, for example, you need to get out probably fairly quickly.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
So this is an extreme case, and this was in Alaska, 81 days below zero, but just got out with his parachute. But over 200 commercial planes have been reported missing since 1948, and half of them are still missing today. So go down, especially in this type of country where you have a lot of trees, you go straight down, you're going to be kind of hard to find. We had one here that went down, and it was 2 years before we found him, and we had an extensive search for him. And the only reason he was found is some Forest Service girl stopped her truck one day to look at something and saw something flash and went out, and here's his Cessna 150, and both bodies were in there. This just happened. This didn't happen. These are some crashes that
2019, a forestry crew working in a remote area of Oregon
found after many years.
A small aircraft that had been missing since the early 1980s. Inside the cabin, they found a locked canvas bag tucked behind the pilot's seat containing old stock certificates and cash totaling nearly $120,000. Authorities traced the plane to a private investor who had died decades earlier. After a legal review, the remaining heirs agreed to split the value with the crew for reporting the find. In 2016, hikers exploring a Canyon in Nevada discovered a partially buried cargo plane from the 1970s. When they looked inside, they found sealed crates filled with unopened camera equipment and film reels still packed in foam cases. Experts later estimated the collection was worth around $60,000 due to its vintage condition. The items were turned over to investigators, and the hikers never got paid for it. In 2021, a farmer repairing a fence on his land in Kansas noticed twisted metal sticking out of a wooded area and realized it was an old crash site. Inside the wreckage, he found a leather satchel containing handwritten journals, a pocket watch, and a small metal box filled with silver coins worth about $45,000. He contacted the pilot's surviving relatives, who asked him to keep the coins in appreciation for preserving the journals. Here are three.
So the point is that you may not be found right away. So have your survival gear on you. This is a sad case of a family decided to go from Wyoming to Pocatello, Idaho, in the middle of winter, and a Cherokee, I think 140 Cherokee, and heavily loaded, had two preteens in the back, very pregnant wife in the front with the husband. They were in a hurry to get to Oregon, so the first stop was going to be Pocatello. They did check the weather. The forecast was low ceilings, fog, light snow, icing, mountain obscuration, low visibility, severe turbulence, and wind shear. Other than that, it was good VFR. But they decided to go. They got over the mountains, got in severe icing. They crashed. The ELT did go off, and the C-130 was dispatched, and they were zooming in on them, and then the ELT went away. They found them. This happened in January. They found them in, I believe, July. And just accidentally, some deputies on horses found them. And the three bodies were in the plane. The husband was over the tail section. He apparently tried to go for help, but the snow was just too deep. The takeaway is, of course, shouldn't be flying that kind of horrible weather, but the ELT batteries had expired a year before the crash, and the antenna was probably covered by snow. Just some bad decision to make, and none of you guys are going to do. So this is the story of a trooper friend of mine, Trooper John Stimson, and he taught survival training and search and rescue. So he was very conscious about that. He broke his own rule one day when this pilot called. She was in a snowstorm, and she was just going to sit down on a gravel bar, trying to get into Cordova. And so he decided to jump, have a helicopter go out and rescue her. And it was a Bell 206. It got in really, really crappy conditions. Ended up doing a hard landing, turning on its side. The pilot broke his back, could not move. John got out of the plane and made repeated trips to the baggage area, but it was jammed shut. So he ended up dying of hypothermia and froze. So it was very, very sad. He got a ship named after him, a patrol boat, but what a sad way to go by a guy that broke his own rule. And this is what Chet was talking about, dressing for success.
When we talk about shelter, a lot of people think of a tent or a tarp. But shelter is also the clothes that you wear and the small kinds of shelter that you can carry on yourself or in a small survival kit. We want to dress for success. We want to dress to survive. And that means if you're starting out someplace that's warm and you're going someplace that's warm, but you're crossing over mountains where it could get really cold at night, maybe you should dress for the place you're crossing over and not where you start and end your journey. So think about what you wear, and that's the beginning.
This makes sense. So here's an extreme case. This guy on the left, I don't know if any of you have flown in the Yukon, but this guy decided to dress like that to go in the Yukon. He had a gear failure, had to land with a really messed up gear in his Cub, and that's how he was dressed to land in the Yukon. They have mosquitoes in the Yukon, if I recall, and bears and everything else. That's how he decided to dress. Fortunately, he had some other guys with him that helped him. But here's an extreme back survival vest, and this thing is amazing. It's got everything you could possibly want. Might be a little cumbersome for 180, 185 pilots that have to reach the flap handles. So we've got something a little bit lighter. This would be my choice if I was going from here to Alaska across the tundra nonstop. I would probably look at something like that, which I did that. I did it in a day and a half one time in a Pacer right across the tundra. It's kind of dumb, but this is the kind of gear I'd want for that. But for everyday flying, maybe something a little bit lighter. So here's what we came up with, and vest is right here, and this is going to be available at the function. Is that right, Robin?
Yes.
Yeah.
In fact, they'll show a better photo here in a little bit. And this vest is going to be outfitted by Mike He's got a list of items in it, and then we're going to raffle it off during the convention, and it will benefit Colonel Buck's Flyers Foundation.
And that helps aspiring aviators, young kids like this one we have in the air coop here. Kids like that are get into flying and got a budget's a consideration for them. They flat out don't have the money to do it, so we try to help them with that. Try to those type of funds. So this is our survival vest, and on the right here is one that's Chet's actually wearing a version of this, and it's a inflatable one. It's a safe one that you inflate yourself. That should be carbon monoxide, not CO2, but this is another version of it. And you'll see we have the floating PLB here on this one, and this is great. It has a strobe built into it, and you can activate it with 406. No subscription with this one. And here's one Bert Watan. I know Bert's going to be your speaker. Here's when he was flying with me. I landed on the lake here to take some pictures, and this is a passenger version of the survival vest. It has a couple pockets, but nice to have your passenger have at least a knife in there so you can cut yourself out of their seatbelt if necessary, and some food, whatever. There's Amy Hoover. Amy Hoover vest that she got from ex-military vest. It's got everything she needs. She's the only survivor of a mid-air collision that I know, and I had just given the guy that crashed into her his check ride for his single engine city, and we really hammered on him about collision avoidance, but apparently he was getting kind of sassy with her, decided he was going to kind of do a dive maneuver in front of her plane for some reason and surprise her. And he did surprise her. It knocked her tail off, and she did an amazing crash landing, and he spun and crashed in and burned, unfortunately. This is a Dick Williams with her wearing the, like Chad has on, the inflatable one. So here's our vest. Weighs a little over 5 pounds, completely loaded. It's got everything you need. On the outside here is a knife. We'll talk about these a little bit more in detail, but it's one you can open with one hand. And I found that's really important. When I was passenger a plane that flipped upside down in the water, the pilot got out and threw his headset in the water, and it wrapped around me. The cord did. My cord wrapped around me, and then the seatbelt was entangled. It broke my left shoulder up a little bit and a double hernia. So I was kind of dinged up a little bit, but I was able to cut myself out using that knife because I could operate it with one hand. And then we have our PLB on the outside and a little mini strobe light. But this is all the stuff you can cram into a vest like that. We have all this stuff, which food for 5 days, and some emergency gear here too. We'll talk about that in a bit. So we'll have a list, and Robin has that list. She'll provide everything we have in it throughout the vest. And this is the gear that you have in the back of the plane, and this is your luxury gear if you can get to it. If you have to get out in a hurry because the airplane is catching fire or whatever, you may not get to this gear. So this is your gift in the back of the airplane. Your sleeping bag and a dry bag and another dry bag. I didn't steal that from the troopers. You can actually buy those through our museum in Anchorage. And what's that thing on the right there is a strap that somebody, I think in a club, suggested that to me, that they have their bag in the back tied to a strap, and they have it by the flap handle. So if they have to get out in a hurry, they can grab that strap and pull their survival gear out. Great idea.
Mike?
Yes.
John and I have a cargo net in the plane to keep items from flying forward.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
Since I've been hit in the back of the head with a metal ammo can in severe turbulence, I think that's a great idea to have a cargo net. So it's kind of a trade-off, but still, if you and John both wear your survival vest, you'll probably have everything you need. So maybe that's not such a factor with two people wearing survival vests, because that's going to be tough to get it out of the cargo net if you have to get out in a hurry. But maybe you'll choose to have a light bag that you can get out that won't be a projectile that's going to kill you in turbulence or in a crash. But yeah, I'm a believer in cargo nets too. One thing that we added in a pack, and this isn't really survival gear, but something I highly recommend you guys, is this little pump you can get on Amazon for about $40. I use it in our hangar to air all of our planes up, and it works great. It weighs ounces, and you can charge your phone with it too. That's a really neat item. And then another radio is a really good idea. This is a shovel saw combination, hatchet, and another knife. Just some of the ideas. A book to read if you're stuck out there for a while. So these are the basics. We want a first aid kit with basic medical supplies, signaling devices, fire starting tools, of course, water purification, some nav aids. I have an old GPS I take with me, but compass, map, whatever. Food supplies, and they should be high energy snacks that you don't have to cook. and in the survival manual. We'll show you some examples of these here in a second. This is a neat little seatbelt cutter. Again, you can get this on Amazon, but it's you can smash a glass out with it too. Plexiglass is a little bit tougher, but you can use it to smash your way out, and it's got a seatbelt cutter. And this is an example of the one-handed opening knife, the Smith & Wesson, but you can get these for cheap as $1, I think. Chet, you want to talk about some of the ideas here we have for our medical kit?
Yeah, absolutely. These are some of the most critical things that a person can have. Bleeding is ultimately likely going to be the one thing that you're going to have to deal with in almost all injuries. So in a case like this, we've got a couple of different things. Steri strips are sometimes used in medicine, but what we're looking at here is kind of in the center at the top is a really neat little setup. And so it's a drawstring sort of a setup where you can actually pull a tension across a wound. And it works fantastically. They're really neat. They're pretty similar to things that we would use in an actual medical setting. The other thing is hemostatic bandages are just absolutely fantastic. They have a coagulant that's impregnated into the bandage, and they work fantastically. A lot of us kind of think about tourniquets and things of that sort, but a lot of the injuries you're going to see are going to be in kind of a junction area where legs offshoot from the torso or arms do. As you really can't tourniquet those. Those are critical. And then we've got a couple of other things, Benadryl, which kind of brings up some critical things. A lot of the emergencies that you would deal with might be things that are more mundane. We think of deceleration trauma and fires and all sorts of exotic things, but it's very possible that a person would just have a life-threatening allergy to a bee or various other things. The Benadryl on the bottom is a great thing. And ways to start fires and various other types of things that we see there as well, bandages. So very good idea.
And we also have, I have some Cipro. Is it Cipro? Is that how you say it?
Cipro, yeah.
Which you can get by prescription, but it's a good thing to have, right?
It is. If you can gain access to an antibiotic, if you have a doctor who can prescribe something, ciprofloxacin is great. It's sometimes used for anthrax, so it's somewhat famous as an antibiotic. And my favorite is Biaxin or Cipro or just any type of an antibiotic. The other critical thing too is that if you'd be using it yourself, that's great. You know what you're allergic to. But if you're potentially going to be using it on somebody else, maybe under a doctor's guidance, having access to something that's not necessarily a penicillin, because those are common allergies.
Okay. Good. So this gal has some pretty good thoughts.
I entered as thunderstorm, then that is an absolute ticket to a fatality. When an aircraft is going to land, we hope that at least they can attempt to keep it wheels down. And that can be impact with the tree canopy, the ground, or the water. If we set ourselves up for success in that crash situation, there is a high chance of survival. If we don't, some of the things that we do see out there is blunt force trauma. Obviously, parts of the aircraft hitting soft tissues in the body and or breaching the cavity of the chest. And the other, of course, is fire, smoke, and fumes. So if there's entrapment in the cockpit or in that passenger cabin and we cannot get out of the aircraft easily, and there is smoke or fumes or fire, people get consumed by that. And that is what really takes out a lot of people. Injury is another one. If we have injuries and they are unable to access their seatbelts or the doors to get out, that also is a huge part because they become entrapped, again, in burning wreckage, in smoke, fumes, or even thermal situations, cold or hot. So all aircraft are created differently and they have different, we'll just say the STCs, right? The ability to fly with just a lap belt. So older aircraft, you just have a lap belt. And some have shoulder straps and some have 4-point harnesses and some have 5-point harnesses. And the difference that we see in medical injuries is, of course, how much of the body is supported to the seat. So aircraft that simply just have a lap belt, there's a lot more when we do impact the ground of that body to slam forward. And we see internal injuries along that, the lower abdominal cavity. Whereas chest, if we have a chest strap across, we will tend to see chest injuries, but it still keeps the body contained inside the aircraft. As we move further, the bigger the jet, the bigger the aircraft, the faster, that's where we start seeing the double harness. So the 4 and the 5-point harnesses. Those those maintain complete control of the person. We don't want the pilot being ejected out of the flight deck. We want them to stay in control. Physical injury wise, we see a lot more success with being fully contained. And when we do find the wreckage, even if there happens to be a body that is a fatality, we're still able to recover the body and bring that home to the family. Now, you can't just go out and buy a shoulder belt and stick it in your aircraft. It has to be maintained and placed in that aircraft with the right mechanic, and it has to fit the weight and balance, and also what kind of impact this type of aircraft could have: tail dragger, seaplane, fixed wing, jet. So it is important to obviously figure out what seatbelt is appropriate, but thinking about in cars back in the day in the 60s, all we had were lap belts. Nobody had shoulder belts. Think of how safe driving is now with airbags. And guess what? Seatbelts have airbags now in aircraft. So a lot of our aircraft have built-in airbags. So if you were to crash, that seatbelt will deploy an airbag and successfully protect the person, the occupant in that flight deck. And that has saved lives many times across the country since that innovation has been out there. So I love the growth and the modernization in aircraft and the safety that can now be put in most aircraft. Most aircraft can accept a seatbelt with an airbag built in. You just need to make sure that it's appropriate. So go to your mechanic or the manufacturer and ask those questions. Preparing for an emergency, depending on what type it is, means isolating the hazards out of the aircraft. This can be electricity by shutting off a master or pulling circuit breakers. That disconnects the battery source and the electricity into the aircraft. Isolating the fuel tanks, so shutting them off and making sure that we lean that engine out as quickly as possible to eliminate any risk of fire building and gaining more fuel. That's a big part. We should always prepare to have that door unlatched prior to impact. If we can remember to unlatch a door and keep it swinging in the breeze, just that airflow around the aircraft will keep the doors pinned shut enough as we enter the terrain, but that eliminates airframe damage where those doors might become jammed and we cannot egress out. With a broken leg or a broken arm, we lack the ability to be able to kick out a windshield or any kind of window, therefore eliminating our chances of getting out. Another key thing that I always teach my students is making sure that when you are preparing to land, you fly the airplane to the ground. Do not just give up and take your hands off the yoke. If you are able to fly that aircraft to the ground, you can control small pitch changes to allow the aircraft to settle into the canopy of the trees or in the water. Keep your thumbs on the outside of the stick or the yoke. If you keep your thumbs open and holding it, we see thumb fractures, and it's almost impossible to open seatbelts or doors or get yourself and others out with fractured body parts. And as an accident investigator, we always look for fractured thumbs to see who the PIC or pilot in command was of that aircraft.
My first crash, my very first crash was in a 185. I was a passenger sitting way in the back when they used to have those little jump seats. And the pilot made an amazing landing in some black spruce trees in Alaska and little damage to the airplane and nobody got hurt. But he flew it right to the crash, did a beautiful job. This is a kit you can buy on Amazon. It's okay, but I think you can do a lot better building your own. And we've got a pretty good list for you. So emergency communication devices, this is critical. Get help right away as soon as you can. So here come some of them, the Garmin InReach, the Spot, which is, I'm not sure, I think he used the Garmin and the guy that crashed the Kitfox. I use this ACR 406 because I'm cheap and there's no service required, subscription required, but it works. What's wonderful now is many phone providers like Verizon, T-Mobile, and probably plenty of others have satellite now. T-Mobile has the T satellite because Elon Musk apparently bought the company or invested in it. So now we have access to satellite with our T-Mobile, and I use it down at our camp because we can't get cell phone coverage there quite a bit. So it immediately goes to satellite, and T-Mobile, I think you can get several calls a month free. So not pushing T-Mobile, but that's what works for me. And so here's this guy. Look where he put his personal locator beacon. What do you think about that location? Well, give you an example of a crash. Jerry, like there's some of this guy's keeping it in the same place on this panel. He crashes in the brush, severe injuries. His PLB is found about 40 feet from the aircraft. Goes through the windshield, somehow goes forward. I don't know exactly how that worked, but it did. The pilot has serious injuries. He can't communicate. If he would have been able to communicate, he would have got rescued very quickly, probably within a couple hours, and he would have survived. But unfortunately, he passed away that night. So keep your PLB on your person. If you don't put it on your person right before you crash, put it on your person. Same thing with your cell phone. Don't have it stuck someplace where it's going to be a projectile. Signaling devices. You may remember the weapons systems officer in Iran got shot down in the was it F-35, I think, wasn't it? Or 35. And he used his underwear to get his rescuers to come to him at the last minute, his American Eagle. But we have something that works just as well. We have in our survival gear, we have these orange big trash bags that are also ground cloths. They work great. We tried them down on a lake and you can see them for miles away. And of course, the flare gun kit is great. Carry in your survival gear. If you have never operated a flare gun or a hand flare.
Hopefully, you'll never have the need to light a flare while in distress, but you definitely need to know about flares and how to use them. It's a matter of safety and law. There are two main types of flares: handheld and those fired from a launcher. Both need to be handled with caution. When using a flare launcher, point it upward, downwind, and away from the rig. For handheld flares, also be downwind and hold them outboard away from the deck because they drip hot residue. There are also smoke flares, where the smoke is visible from miles away and obviously for use during the day. Don't practice using flares while on the boat. Look for times when the U.S. Coast Guard hosts special days to.
So those are just flares, but we don't want to burn down the forest, so flares might not be the best choice. I don't know if anybody's ever really got.
How to use a signal mirror? The majority of signal mirrors come with a hole right in the middle. And that is that you can peer through it. So what happens is when you have a sunny day, a signal mirror, and an aircraft looking for you, this is the best way to get found. Can't look directly at the sun. The aircraft's in a different direction. So what you do is obviously put your eye through the hole. Don't stare at the sun. You want to stare at where the reflection is on your finger. In order to line it up, you look through the hole and position the reflection through your fingers, aiming through the hole as well as the V that you've created in your fingers. You move the whole setup. You aim this at, say, another hiker or an aircraft, anything you're trying to get the attention of. Thanks for watching.
This is something great that you can get on Amazon, these little laser signal devices, and pilots hate it when you shine at them at night when people do that to us, but these seem to work great. These aren't dog toys. These actually do the job. Even in the daytime, you can see them fairly well.
Mike?
Yes.
It's hard to hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. Thank you for letting me know. So these laser signal devices, $10 on Amazon. Great thing to carry. They're about the size of a pocket pen, so recommend those. Fire starters. Here's what we carry in our survival vest. Butane lighters, and this is really anything dry or lint dipped in Vaseline and birch bark up here. The birch bark you can get all over Idaho and Alaska, and this stuff is amazing. I discovered this when I lived way out in the bush in Alaska and started a lot of fires with it, even when it was wet or snowy. This little stove is tiny, it fits in your pocket. This is it on top of its canister. And this is a jet flame lighter, which is really cool. You can get those on Amazon for $20. We'll show those in a minute. And here's a guy who shows a real neat trick. And now you could use an aircraft battery for this too.
And just like that, we started fire with the battery and a stick of gum. Now let me show you how I did that. Yep, you heard me right. You will only need a stick of gum, and it's important to know you will want the gum with the foil on it. And you will need a battery. You can get a battery from your headlamp or a flashlight. And this is a flashlight that I always carry on me. So this is a battery that I will always have when I'm out in the field. So first what we want to do is we want to remove the gum from the wrapper. We're only gonna need one half of it. And now what we wanna do is, we're gonna take this one half, we're just gonna split it, get closer and closer to that center. We're almost gonna give it like an hourglass figure. So want to be left with something looks some roughly like this right here. Want to make sure you have your tender bundle readily available. And this is just some dried up leaves and some bird nested jute twine. Now, that's the important part. You want to go four side to the connectors of the battery. You want to go one on the positive side, and you want to do this next one on the negative side.
Yeah, that works great. And here's a neat way to start a fire. I think Robin talked about this. A lot of us have lane forks. There you go. So this is dryer lint soaked in
Dryer lint with Vaseline.
Good thing to carry. It's light. You can put it in your vest. And here's my favorite, the birch bark.
Here's one of my favorite fire starters, birch bark.
And this is the torch I talked to you about. I won't show you how it works, but it's great. It puts out one heck of a fire. $20 on Amazon. So when I was in Alaska, I learned from the Indians the old Indian trick of starting a fire. The way they do it. Works with avgas too. We don't want to do that. If you do use avgas or some other accelerant, you want to, of course, use a little bit. You can get away from it, not like this. This is a great app. We do have fires here. Hopefully, we won't have any during the convention this year. Sometimes they don't come in until September, so hopefully it'll be like that this year. But this app, if you don't have it yet, Watch Duty, really excellent. Gives you the fires, and it also gives you the wind direction and air quality. So here's an example of what I learned in Alaska when I was on the Mulchatna River, and I drink from that beautiful stream, and it was like 20,000, no, excuse me, 200,000 caribou in that herd at Mulchatna way, way back in the olden days. And so I thought it was okay to drink that pristine looking water. I mean, here's why you don't. Oh, let me back up here. And here we go. Well, think about drinking downstream from this. And there you go. Why animals decide that a creek is their bathroom, I don't know, but what do you know about Giardia? I've had it. What do you know about the doctor?
It's such a tough thing. Giardia is a very common reason for diarrhea, and it typically is found in standing bodies of water. And so the issue would be that if you're ever down in an area, it could really complicate things quite a bit. But even just during camping, it's just not very much fun at all. You can get dehydrated very quickly. It's a diarrheal illness with abdominal cramping, and it's kind of miserable. So not very fun.
Mine lasted for a couple months and pretty bad. But so these Tetra tabs are something you can carry in your vest, and then this life straw also fits in a vest. It's pretty convenient to have. Navigation aids, excuse me. This compass is good. This little bracelet has a temperature gauge and a compass on it and a light, probably a fire starter. And then here's an old GPS. I see Sporty's just came out with a radio, portable radio, has a GPS built into it. That's kind of neat. So a little help from above. And this is a question we had earlier. How do you close your flight plan or get help when you're in some area you don't have any coverage by radio or cell phone coverage? Here's what you can do. So carry a chart with you. I recommend carrying a chart in case your equipment fails, but also carry an IFR chart. Here's one, I think Johnson Creek somewhere in here. Here's Salt Lake City, and their frequency for center is 132.4. So they say you're out camping and you have good visibility and you see an airplane going over you at 38,000 feet or whatever it might be, or you hear one if you have crappy weather. What you can do, get on the frequency using your chart to the nearest approach, and this one is Salt Lake City 132.4, and you can call that jet and say, would you please close my flight plan? They don't always, they're supposed to monitor guard, but I've found out from pilots that they aren't always listening, but they're always listening to center. And they're happy. I can tell you from personal experience in Alaska, they are happy to pass on to close your flight plan for you. So that answers the question, maybe how you can get out, in a pinch, how you can get a message out to close your flight plan. Here's some of our survival food, these little tabs here. These are, I think, 5 days of food on the right, and they fit in this vest just beautifully, or in this pocket over here. And then what you want are high energy, high calorie foods that you don't have to cook. So we have hard candies and granola bars and all kinds of stuff over here. And these little whip things are great. You can get these on Amazon. We'll have them in the pouch, and they have 200 milligrams of caffeine too, so that keeps you going. And high energy food. Bear protection. So people ask about bear protection, and my experience in Alaska is that bears won't attack you unless they want to. If they decide they're going to attack you for whatever reason, they will. They may just be having a bad day and they want to attack you. I had a friend asleep in his tent, no food anywhere around him, and bear picked him up in the middle of the night, put his head in his mouth, and proceeded to crunch on it until he scalped him, and then took him and threw him around like a doll, and then buried him in the ground. And his wife couldn't get to any of the 4 weapons that were in there, lean-to. And fortunately, he survived. He had part of his butt put on his head to skin, so we called him Butthead behind his back for many years. But here are some of the bear protection use bear spray, and it has somewhat of a success rate, but the latest fatality of bear attack was a week or so ago in one of the parks, and they found the bear spray laying next to the body. So hit or miss. This is what we carried in Alaska. We were issued a Remington 12-gauge shotgun. I think that's a great choice. We put the Brennicky slugs in it because we figured if the bear's coming from, say, 50 feet, you can get off a shot and maybe hit it with the slug and put it down. That's a real lethal load. Then when it gets closer, you go to your triple-aught or double-aught buck, whatever you have in it. So that's what I recommend for bear protection. Smith & Wesson now came out with this 500, and if you can shoot that without closing your eyes and flinching, that's great. But sometimes handguns are good, and sometimes they can cause more of a problem. Shotgun's always over-reliable for me. Yes, we do have grizzly bears in Idaho. Bug spray. Oh, you wouldn't ask me about a bear story. You were asking about that.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that bear story.
So I'll tell you a bear story. So people ask me about a bear story because we had a lot of bear encounters in Alaska, and this is probably the best one. So we fly into this place in the Brooks Range, and it was a camp we were going to be working out of during hunting season. So we got dropped off, and we had some fuel, and we took these fuel, and they were in plastic containers, took them up to the cabin, and on the second trip, we had over our can there. Now we're starting to get our food up. And there was a grizzly bear that had got into the fuel, and he bit into those cans of fuel and just chugged the whole fuel and just started running around the cabin like crazy, and then dropped flat down on the ground.
Holy smokes.
No, he didn't die. He ran out of gas. That's terrible. Isn't that terrible? I'm sorry. The kids love it though.
Mike,
Yes.
there was a question. What about air horns and bears?
About what? I'm sorry.
Air horns. Air
Oh,
horns.
yeah, that might work. It might work. It just depends on the bear. If you, in the case of my friend that got his head severely damaged and scalped, they think that bear, they've been shooting a movie there, and they think the bear had been wounded. And so that bear was just a really pissed off bear. And I think a horn would probably aggravate him. So if it's a sow with cubs, same thing. It may just be so protective, it's going to go after you anyway. It doesn't care about noise. So it's a hit and miss thing. I mean, bells, people wear bells. I think that can attract bears too. So I don't know. I guess it depends on what the attitude of the bear is. I've seen bears where, people say a black bear will never attack you. Well, that's nonsense. We had a case where a couple honeymooned in Alaska, and the bear kept trying to get into the cabin, and they were 12 miles from the nearest road. And they decided, well, it's a honeymoon. We're not going to take guns. And the bear kept trying to get into the window. So the husband said, I'm going to hike out. I'm going to put you up on the roof. They got back, and all they found were her tennis shoes and her fingernail marks going down the cabin. And the bear pulled her down. So to me, 12 gauge shotgun's the way to go. But that's just me. I've seen a lot of bear mauling instances in Alaska, and I have a feeling for bears that shotgun's the best way to deal with them. Something a little less lethal is mosquitoes, but they can be deadly in Alaska. And to me, DEET's the only thing to use. Deep woods off just seems to bring the bugs into the deep woods to get you. But this stuff is great. It's messy, but it's great. Here's some books. This little tiny first aid kit is something you can put in your pocket. Really a neat little thing. Survival Hacks is a fun book. These are things you can carry with you in your gear, and if you get bored or you're surviving, you're waiting out weather, just some good reads. Edible plants, you want to make sure you're eating a huckleberry instead of something that will kill you. So then this stuff you can get online too. It's a good thing to refer to. We have great huckleberries here about the time you guys are going to be here. And I can tell you where to go to get them when you get up to North Idaho, but they're great eating. Just want to make sure you're getting the right thing. And Amy's book is great too. This Mountain Canyon Backcountry Flying, I recommend it to everybody. A new edition is coming out, and I actually wrote a little, very, very small part of it, but it's a very impressive book. And you've read it. Yeah.
Indeed, I have.
Yeah, good stuff. So if you remember, one of the things that the Kit Fox crash, Dave, when he made that landing, he said, he didn't say shoot. This one says, shoot, instead of what he said. But same thing. So use that acronym. I like acronyms for flying. We all know cigars and gumps and all that kind of stuff. But for this one, shoot. So the first A is airplane, fly at the best glide speed, just like Dave did with his Kit Fox. You heard the stall warning horn come off, and that got us a little bit worried when he's making a turn and pulling the nose up, but seemed to work. Second A is pick an airstrip, just like he did. Into the wind if possible, but don't try to force it back to runway. In other words, don't do like that Cherokee did on Thursday, where he tried to yank it back to the runway and he stalled, spun, and crashed right into a house. S is systems kit. Pardon me? We good? Okay. So the S is systems check. Check fuel. See if maybe you knocked the fuel selector off. Mixture, mags, and if time, use your emergency checklist. The H is hello, radio, mayday, ELT, squawk 7700, and secure your phone in PLB. Get it on your person if you don't have it on your person. If you have it stuck on your panel or up on top like you're not supposed to, put it in your pocket. And then right before you're going to touch down, get your fuel off, masters and mix off, and on seatbelts, get your seatbelts, make sure they're on, they're low on your pelvis. I had a guy that had it too high and it ruptured his spleen and spent the night out and didn't make it, unfortunately.
I've seen that.
I bet. Yeah. So low on your pelvis, tight, and slide your seat back as far back you can get away from that panel and engine. And you guys remember the rock group from the 60s, the doors? Open the doors before landing. You don't want to get caught in the plane that catches on fire. And don't turn an emergency landing into disaster. Generally, a soft field procedure, slow speed works, but keep calm. Fly the airplane to the crash site with all your skills. I've had, I think, 3 engine failures and shooting. Had to go down several times. And Errol actually was a fairly non-event. It turned out just fine. But you want to watch for power lines, traffic. I did have signs, so that was bad. But watch out for those things when you're landing. You want to land and walk away to fly another day like this. Happy couple. This is actually done in Roberta Sheldon, friends of mine in Talkeetna, but you want to end up like that. And here's some references that Robin recommended, and I didn't put the links to these up here because they may not be active by the time you get to them. Who knows? They may be taken down. So this is the topic, but this is exactly how they are worded. If you put those words in, it will take you to this crash. And the near crash at Johnson Creek, this 206, and then the real crash. It came back. It did a go around and almost crashed, And then it came back and did a real crash, fatal, unfortunately, same airplane. And then I do have the link for Amy Hoover's, because I know that's going to be there for a long time. And Smiley Creek, mountain flying skills, that's a really good one, choosing your route, weather. And McGee Airport, this is an airport. It's only like, I think 18, 20 miles from Coeur d'Alene, and it's a really neat place to go to. Most of these strips around here were built for military planes during World War II so they could get them away from the coast and protect them from being shot up during the war. So they had all these strips they built. So they're really good strips, nice grassy strips. Sullivan Lake is another really, really great one. So you can see approach of that. And that's up by Priest Lake. I recommend that if you want to go camping. And then we have a view from the cockpit, Kavanaugh Bay approach and landing. That's a really good thing to do if you guys are going into Kavanaugh Bay. And if you would like to, please sign up on our Coeur d'Alene flyers on Facebook. We'll welcome you to that. We post things every day on there and keep up with the NOTAMs and other developments at the airport. So anybody wants to join, just get on there and I'll approve you. I think that's a wrap. Any questions?
Mike, go ahead and sign out of your presentation so they can see you, please.
Okay. Okay.
So,
thank you, Mike. Thank you, Chet. And thank you, Robin. That was a great presentation.
Oh, thank you, Harry.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Any questions from anyone or comments or better ideas than we had?
and to unmute yourself, go ahead and hit your space key.
I have one comment. I would say that if you get an emergency, probably the best thing to do is have memory items that you remember and practice all the time, because when you get in a crash, you really go into forgetfulness. And so it might be advantageous to have memory items, just like the airline pilots do when they have certain things happen.
Yeah, that's a great point. And you could probably start with that shoot checklist, which I can send anybody if they want that. But yeah, just be thinking about that. And the other thing I like people to do is sit in a plane, close their eyes, and find their items in the plane. Where's your ELT switch? Where's your fire extinguisher? I didn't see one in that kit box, and I'm sure he probably had one somewhere. But have a fire extinguisher you can grab and actually get and put the fire out. It's amazing people throw them away in the back and don't think, what if I need that?
Absolutely. The other thing that I would bring up is that don't just buy these things and put them into a bag and throw them into the airplane. Actually buy a couple of copies of the things that you're going to have in your bag and actually take those things out, the ones that you're just gonna play with, and make sure that you know how they work and what's going to happen and what types of things you would actually use. The other concept I think is that for those people who hopefully many people have never actually seen a crash of any kind, but you can't even believe the violence in some of these crashes. And so when you look at something like a device that's up on an instrument cluster and actually making it through an aircraft windscreen and 40 feet downrange, not unbelievable at all. And the amount of energy that's liberated in some of these accidents is just mesmerizing. So.
Very true.
We had someone come in later and he asked, are there any recommendations on vests and gears to put in it? Could you go ahead then and pull your vest forward? And Jim, I want to let you know that this vest that Mike has put together has, we're going to be ordering it for the club as a merchandise you can purchase. And Mike has provided us with a list of the items he's put into that vest. So stay tuned. We'll have a vest with actual club logo on it that you can purchase at the event, or you can buy a raffle ticket and win Mike's vest here and during the convention, and that money will go towards Colonel Buck's Flyers Foundation.
Yeah, so the really nice thing out here is a nice knife that you can open with one hand. That's critical. If one hand's broken or your arm's broken, or in my case, my shoulder's messed up, you can open this and cut yourself out of the seatbelt. But we have everything from food to medicines, and this bottom kit here is all first aid gear. So we know our first aid gear is all on one side. It's all in this pocket here. So you know you can get to it. You don't have it scattered first aid gear with food, for example. Everything, a pocket has a purpose. Each pocket has a purpose. So this is survival gear here, cutting stuff, fire stuff, and food on this side. And and this is your sleeping bag. Actually, had to actually have a sleeping bag in here. It's tiny. So it works great. So yeah, we have a total list of everything you need. This little strobe light, neat little thing to have. So this is jam packed with you could survive on this thing for a good week or two. I mean, you can live without food for how long, Chet?
Oh boy, I mean, it's probably a couple of months, I would guess. It's a pretty significant amount of time. Certainly several weeks for most people.
Yeah. So
Monty had a question. Monty, go ahead and hit your space bar or unmute.
Just wondering if we could get a copy of the text so we could, see all those things emailed out to us or something.
I will say that I've recorded this session and hopefully I can figure out how to go ahead and get that to everybody or post it on YouTube.
Great, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
And I sent you, I think, in a file showing everything inside the vest too, didn't I, Robin? I think I did. Can you hear me?
I'm sorry, what did you say, Mike?
Oh, I'm sorry, I need to lean forward. I sent you a list of everything inside the vest, right? All the gear we have in
Yes,
it.
you did.
Okay.
And I have that,
Okay,
and
good.
I'll provide it to the people who participated.
I have one more comment.
Yeah, Harry.
Yeah, if you don't have a shoulder harness in your airplane, immediately put one in, because that's one thing that saves lives is shoulder harnesses, along with a lap belt, of course, but shoulder harnesses is so critical to any airplane.
100% agree, Harry. So many wrecks I saw in Alaska would not have been fatal if it wasn't their head hit a radio button, for example, right in their forehead and just put like a bullet hole in their head. So I totally agree with that. The gal Mulaney was talking about the ones that had the airbags built into them, and those sound really sweet. And I was actually going to buy them, but I found out through CAP they were taking them off old airplanes because the maintenance problem with them was so high. They had so many, an AD come at them apparently, and so that's something to look at. Maybe they've got that resolved by now. I hope so, because I think it is a great idea.
Yeah. And they're very, very inexpensive, really, in the overall picture of belts and stuff like that. I mean, they're only a couple of $100, I think I paid for the set that I had, but that was quite a while ago.
Yeah, I so agree with you, Harry. I think that's essential. And if you buy a plane, that's the first thing you should put in if they don't have it. Or even flight, you should put harness belts in it. I totally agree.
The other thing is the wider, the better. The forces that are being imparted to the shoulders or other structures are going to be imparted based on the width of the shoulder strap. So if you just get a really narrow strap, it's actually a more concentrated force that may actually have a higher likelihood of injuring the person.
Good point.
I've seen that in real life. My son was saved by that, by the shoulder harnesses. They were thin, and he had bruises all up and down his shoulder areas, but it saved his life. He had bruises all over, but
yeah, there's certain things you don't really consider until you've actually seen them. And but yeah, there's a lot of things that really become more dangerous. And there are things that you don't necessarily think of until that you're actually looking at that, thinking, "Wow, I hadn't considered that would be dangerous."
And that brings up a point. These vests, the way I pack this vest, is there's nothing. If you wear this between you and the harness belts, there's nothing in this vest that's going to cause injury to you. Everything is soft between you and the belt, and that's critical. We had a trooper that crashed, and the only injury he had his ballpoint pen in his
Old
pocket.
Faithful is back.
Pardon me?
Oh my gosh, it's so funny. I have like a
Hi, Essex.
Hi.
Hello, Essex. What's going on? Anyway, he had a pin in his pocket and under the shoulder harness, and he crashed, and the impact was so much that the pin went into penetrated his chest and almost hit his heart. He was very lucky that he didn't get serious injury. Bled a little bit, but he survived. But that's just a smart thing. When you put your harness pad on, don't have anything between you and your body.
Really good point.
it's going to injure you. I mean, have a shirt, please. But yeah.
Did anybody else have any questions of Mike and Dr. Chet? Well, if any of you are signed up with the FAA to get WINGS credits through some of these courses, this is WINGS credit eligible. Thanks to Mike and Dr. Chet for making that happen. A few of you went ahead and sent me your contact information. I can put it on the FAA list, but if you didn't contact John and I earlier and you want to be given credit for this, please email us at pnwskywagon@gmail.com. Give us your name, your email, and your zip code. Okay, anything else, Mike, for wrapping up?
I think if you have recorded this, do you want to tell everybody where it's going to be available for recording? Do you want me to post it on our YouTube as well, and you're going to post it on yours, or?
Yeah, I'll attempt to do that. And then also too, I just want to announce that we have 2 more Zoom sessions. The June date hasn't been finalized yet, but there's a very, very good chance we're going to have a capable